The remote fell from Gerald Whitmore's hand, clattering across the marble floor. On the massive television screen, 3 dirty faces stared back at him. 3 boys huddled under a freeway bridge, wrapped in newspapers against the November cold. Sources tell us the Martinez brothers have been living rough for 6 months, the news anchor continued. 17-year-old Eli cares for his younger siblings, Marcus, 14, and 9-year-old Tyler, with nowhere else to turn. Gerald pressed the button on his wheelchair, rolling closer to the screen. His breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle against the disease that was slowly stealing his body. ALS. Lou Gehrig's disease. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less. The camera panned to show the boys' makeshift shelter, cardboard walls, a shopping cart with their few possessions. Tyler, the youngest, clutched a torn, stuffed animal. "Carmen!" Gerald called, his voice a weak rasp. The nurse appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Yes, Mr. Gerald." "Call my lawyer. Now." Carmen frowned. "It's past midnight. Can't it wait until morning?" Gerald's eyes, the only part of him that still moved freely, locked onto hers. "Those boys. I want to adopt them." Carmen nearly dropped her towel. In the 2 years she'd cared for Gerald, he'd never mentioned children. Never spoke of family except to curse his estranged son Richard. Most days, he barely spoke at all. "Adopt them? But sir, you can barely—" "I know what I can and cannot do." The words came out harsh, but his eyes softened. "Please, call James. Tell him it's urgent." The lawyer arrived at 2 in the morning, still in his pajamas. James Porter had been Gerald's attorney for 30 years, had seen him through 3 corporate mergers and 2 divorces. But this request caught him completely off guard. "Gerald, you understand what you're asking? 3 teenage boys. You need constant care yourself. The state will never make it happen." Gerald's voice was barely above a whisper, but the command was clear. "I have money. Use it." Within a week, the story hit the news. "Dying millionaire adopts homeless teens," screamed the headlines. The morning talk shows had a field day. "The man can't even lift a glass of water," one anchor chuckled during her broadcast. "What's he going to do with 3 troubled street kids? Change their diapers?" Her co-host laughed. "Maybe they can take turns feeding him?" Gerald watched the coverage from his study, Carmen at his side. She fumed at the television. "Ignorant fools. They don't know you." "Maybe they're right," Gerald said quietly. "Maybe I'm fooling myself." Before Carmen could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the intercom, a social worker's voice announced their arrival. The boys entered the mansion like wild animals cornered in a cage. Eli, the oldest, swept the grand foyer with suspicious eyes. Marcus slouched against the doorframe, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Tyler hid behind his brothers, still clutching that same stuffed animal from the news footage. "Mr. Whitmore?" The social worker, a tired woman with graying hair, stepped forward. "These are the Martinez brothers." Gerald rolled his wheelchair closer. Up close, he could see the wariness in their faces, the defensive hunch of their shoulders. How long since anyone had looked at them with kindness? "Eli, Marcus, Tyler," he said, pronouncing each name carefully. "Welcome home." Eli's jaw tightened. "This ain't our home, old man. We're just here 'cause we got nowhere else." "Fair enough," Gerald replied. He gestured around the foyer. "But while you're here, it's yours too." The first few weeks were exactly what the morning show hosts had predicted. The boys tested every boundary. They ate with their hands, wiped their greasy fingers on the expensive furniture. Marcus broke a Ming vase within 3 days. Eli stayed out until dawn, returning with bleary eyes and reeking of cheap beer. Gerald watched it all with quiet patience. When they stole money from his desk, $30 he'd left there deliberately, he said nothing. When they blasted hip-hop at 2 a.m., he simply closed his bedroom door. Carmen was less understanding. "They're walking all over you." she complained one morning after finding cigarette burns on the Persian rug. "They're testing me," Gerald corrected, "to see if I'll throw them out like everyone else has. And if they burn the house down first?" He almost smiled. "Then we'll build a new one." The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday. Gerald was in his study, listening to an old Coltrane album, when Tyler crept in. The boy hadn't spoken a word since arriving, communicating only through nods and shakes of his head. Tyler held up a piece of paper, a drawing. Gerald studied it carefully. 3 stick figures under a roof, a larger figure in a square with wheels, all of them smiling. "Is that us?" Gerald asked gently. Tyler nodded. Then, so quietly Gerald almost missed it. "Thank you." Something cracked in Gerald's chest. Not physically. His body had its own timeline of decay, but emotionally. When was the last time anyone had thanked him for anything? When had he last done something worth thanking? That night at dinner, he spoke more than he had in months. He told them about his years building his company, about the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt, about his son Richard, and how they hadn't spoken in 5 years. Eli listened with grudging interest. Marcus actually looked up from his plate. Tyler drew circles on his napkin, but Gerald caught him glancing up between crayon strokes. "Why'd you do it?" Eli asked finally. "Really, why us?" Gerald considered the question. The honest answer felt too raw, too desperate. But maybe these boys, who'd survived on honesty and street smarts, deserved the truth. "Because I'm dying," he said simply, "and I wanted to do one good thing before I go." The table fell silent. Carmen froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "That's messed up," Marcus said, but his voice was softer than usual. "Yeah," Gerald agreed. "It probably is." Eli leaned back in his chair, studying Gerald with eyes that seemed far too old for 17. "What happens to us when you're gone?" "You'll be taken care of. James is setting up trusts, college funds, everything you'll need. But we'll have to leave here." "Not necessarily. The house will be yours, if you want it." Another long silence. Then Eli did something that shocked everyone. He reached across the table and awkwardly patted Gerald's hand. "Thanks, old man." It wasn't much, just a brief touch, quick and embarrassed. But for Gerald, it was everything. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Carmen found Gerald crying quietly in his study. Not from pain, though the disease was relentless in its march through his body. From relief, maybe, or gratitude, or fear that he'd started something he didn't have time to finish. "They'll be okay," Carmen said softly. "Whatever happens, you've given them something." "Have I?" Gerald wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, one of the few movements still available to him. "Or have I just selfishly brought them into my dying?" Carmen knelt beside his wheelchair. "You've given them a chance. Most people don't even get that." Outside, rain tapped against the windows. In one of the mansion's many bedrooms, 3 boys who'd lived their entire lives on the edges of society slept in real beds for the 3rd week in a row. In the morning, there would be hot breakfast, clean clothes, and the strange, unsettling comfort of an adult who asked for nothing in return. Gerald Whitmore, dying millionaire, sat in his study and listened to Coltrane. For the first time in years, maybe decades, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Purpose. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Gerald?" It was Eli's voice. "Tyler wants to know if you'll teach him chess tomorrow." Gerald pressed the button. "Tell him yes. And Eli? There's a GED prep book in the library, 3rd shelf, if you want it." A pause. Then, "Yeah, okay, thanks." As the connection ended, Gerald realized something had changed in those 2 weeks. The boys still tested boundaries, still carried the wariness of the streets. But they'd started looking him in the eye. They'd started saying his name, not old man anymore, and just Gerald. Sometimes, in quieter moments, G. It was small progress, baby steps, but for a man whose own steps were numbered, any movement forward felt like a miracle. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came something Gerald hadn't expected: the sound of laughter echoing through his mansion's empty halls. Real laughter, not the bitter, mocking kind he'd grown used to from his years in business. This was different, pure, young. "Gee, Marcus is cheating again." Tyler's voice carried from the game room, followed by an indignant protest from his middle brother. Gerald rolled his wheelchair down the corridor, a slow journey that would have frustrated him months ago. Now he savored it. Each rotation of the wheels brought him closer to the chaos he'd invited into his ordered world. He found them sprawled on the Persian rug, the same one that had borne cigarette burns just months earlier. Now it hosted an epic Monopoly battle, with Tyler as the unlikely real estate mogul and Marcus counting his dwindling stack of fake money. "He's got hotels on everything," Marcus complained, gesturing wildly at the board. "Nobody gets that lucky." "It's called strategy," Tyler shot back, grinning. At 9 years old, he'd discovered he had a talent for games and talking. The quiet boy who once communicated only in drawings now chattered almost constantly. Eli looked up from where he lay on the couch, a thick GED study guide balanced on his chest. "Hey G, want to play president? I'm getting destroyed here." "I'm the worst at Monopoly," Gerald said, positioning his wheelchair at the coffee table. "But I'll watch. Maybe learn Tyler's secret." The truth was, he enjoyed watching them more than playing. In the past month, he'd witnessed something remarkable. The boys were becoming brothers in more than name. Real brothers, who fought and laughed and protected each other in ways that hadn't been possible when survival consumed all their energy. Carmen appeared in the doorway with a tray of sandwiches. "Lunch, gentlemen, and Tyler, don't let that dog of yours get into the kitchen again." "Rex is hungry," Tyler protested, but he was already moving toward the food. Rex. That had been another surprise. 2 weeks ago, the boys had found a 3-legged mutt limping down the street. Without asking permission, they'd brought him home. The dog now claimed a spot on Gerald's expensive furniture as if he'd been born to it. "That dog probably eats better than we did on the streets," Eli remarked, handing out sandwiches. "Remember that time we tried to catch pigeons in the park?" Marcus added. "With that broken shopping net?" "We never caught nothing but trouble," Eli grinned. Then, catching Gerald's expression, he added, "Sorry, we never caught anything." "I understand perfectly," Gerald said. His speech was getting worse, words slurring together despite his efforts. But the boys had adapted, learning to wait for him to finish, never rushing or completing his sentences. After lunch, Eli returned to his studying while Marcus retreated to his room, what had once been a formal dining room that nobody ever used. He'd claimed it as his workshop, filling it with salvaged electronics and model kits that Gerald had quietly purchased. Tyler remained, sprawling across the carpet with a fresh sketchpad. "Want to see what I drew yesterday?" he asked, already flipping through pages. Gerald nodded. Tyler's drawings had become a window into how their lives were changing. The early sketches had been all sharp edges and dark shadows. Now they were softer, brighter. Family portraits that included Gerald's wheelchair, Rex's missing leg, Carmen's ever-present apron. "This one's for the wall in your study," Tyler announced, holding up his latest creation. It showed all of them at the dinner table, but done in the style of an old family photograph. Even the frame was drawn in careful detail. "It's beautiful, Tyler. Thank you." The boy beamed, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why'd you really pick us? There's lots of kids with no homes. Why not little kids? The ones everyone wants?" Gerald had been expecting this question for months. He activated his voice synthesizer, a new purchase that helped when his natural speech became impossible, and spoke carefully. "Because I saw something in that news story. The way you held your brother's hands. The way Eli looked at both of you. That kind of love. It's rare. I wanted to be part of it." Tyler considered this, his small face serious. We used to fight a lot, before, when we had nothing. Now you have something. Yeah. Tyler's grin returned. Now we got you, and this big house, and Rex, and Carmen makes the best grilled cheese. After Tyler left to show Eli his drawing, Gerald sat alone in the quiet study. Through the window, he could see Eli in the courtyard, teaching Tyler how to dribble a basketball. Marcus had appeared, trying to engineer some kind of hoop improvement using PVC pipes and duct tape. His phone buzzed. A text from James, his lawyer, just checking in. Any problems with the boys? Gerald typed back slowly. Only good ones. The truth was more complicated, of course. Eli still occasionally came home smelling like beer. Marcus had been caught shoplifting at a hardware store, though he'd returned the items when confronted. Tyler had nightmares that woke the entire house. But they were trying, learning to trust, learning to be children instead of survivors. Carmen knocked and entered without waiting, a privilege she'd earned through months of patience. Dr. Chen is here for your evening checkup. Gerald nodded. The doctor visits had become routine, weekly monitoring of his deteriorating condition, adjustments to medications, discussions about what to expect as the disease progressed. How are you feeling today? Dr. Chen asked as she set up her equipment. Happy, Gerald answered, surprising himself with the truth of it. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. That's not a medical term I usually hear from my ALS patients. Maybe it should be. She smiled, checking his vital signs. Your breathing is more labored than last week. We should talk about increasing your respiratory support. They discussed technical details, equipment, timelines, decisions that needed to be made. Gerald listened with half his attention. The other half was focused on the sounds from outside his study. Eli explaining algebra to Tyler, Marcus arguing with Carmen about proper tool storage, the ordinary chaos of family life. Mr. Whitmore, Dr. Chen prompted gently, did you hear my question about the feeding tube? I heard. Gerald looked at her directly. I want to wait. A little longer. She frowned. Your swallowing reflex is already compromised. If you aspirate. I understand the risks, but family dinners are important in this house. I want to eat with my boys for as long as possible. After the doctor left, James arrived for their weekly business meeting. The lawyer spread papers across Gerald's desk, but his attention kept drifting to the boys' voices drifting in from the hallway. The Embrace initiative is moving forward, James reported. We've identified 5 potential sites for the first youth centers. But Gerald, we need to finalize your will. The latest version. Has Richard seen it yet? James shifted uncomfortably. He's not entitled to see it before you pass. But if he hears about any of this, he will, eventually. Gerald stared at the papers without really seeing them. Richard, his son, his first failure. How many years had he spent comparing his success in business to his failure as a father? There's something else, James continued. The media is still following this story. There's talk of a documentary. Tell them no. I already did. But Gerald, people are inspired. A man in your condition, taking in 3 troubled teenagers. It's unusual. Unusual. Gerald almost laughed. Is that what they call it? A crash from the kitchen interrupted them, followed by Rex barking and Tyler's delighted shriek. James winced, but Gerald felt that familiar warmth in his chest. That's just Tyler, he explained. Probably tried to make Rex do a trick. You don't seem concerned. I'm learning to choose my battles. Gerald wheeled himself to the window again. Eli had convinced Marcus to put down his tools and join the basketball game. 3 boys, a 3-legged dog, and a makeshift court in what had once been his meditation garden. Besides, he added, minor disasters are a sign of life in this house. I spent too many years in perfect silence. That evening at dinner, something shifted. The boys had developed their own routine. Eli setting the table, Marcus adjusting Carmen's cooking to their tastes, Tyler drawing placemats for special occasions. Tonight felt different. though Gerald couldn't immediately identify why. Then he realized they were all talking at once, over each other, interrupting, arguing about homework and movies and whether Rex deserved table scraps. It wasn't polite conversation. It was messy and loud and completely wonderful. "Hey, G," Eli said suddenly, making the others quiet. "We've been talking, all of us." Gerald set down his fork, his movements now requiring deliberate concentration. "What about?" "About..." Eli glanced at his brothers for support. "About what happens later. You know, when I die." The word hung in the air. None of them had spoken it aloud before, though it lived in every space between their words. "Yeah," Eli cleared his throat. "We want you to know we're not going anywhere, even after." "Unless you kick us out," Marcus added quickly. Tyler nodded solemnly. "We're a family now. Families stick together." Gerald felt his throat tighten. He reached for his voice synthesizer, but Eli stopped him. "You don't have to say anything. We just wanted you to know." Later, after the boys had gone to bed, Gerald sat in his study with Carmen. She was filing his medications, a nightly ritual they'd developed. "They're growing up fast," she observed. "Too fast." "No such thing, Mr. Gerald. Kids grow at exactly the pace they need to." She paused, holding a bottle of painkillers. "You need more of these?" "Not yet." The pain was there, constant and creeping. But it was manageable compared to the peace he felt watching the boys become who they were meant to be. His computer chimed with an email notification. Richard, the first contact in months. "Dad, I heard about your project. We need to talk. Call me." Gerald deleted it immediately. Some conversations could wait. Outside his window, he could see light from Tyler's room. The boy was probably drawing again, working on some midnight masterpiece. Eli's room was dark, but soft music drifted from under the door. Marcus's workshop light was on, the sound of tinkering barely audible. 3 boys, who had once huddled under a bridge, now occupied his house with the confidence of belonging. They had learned to trust again, to hope, to plan for futures that extended beyond the next meal or safe place to sleep. Gerald Whitmore, dying from a disease that was stealing his body one muscle at a time, had never felt more alive. "Carmen?" he called as she prepared to leave. "Tomorrow, can you call James? I want to add something to the will." "Of course." "What?" Gerald smiled, or attempted to. His facial muscles didn't always cooperate anymore. "I want to make sure the boys know how proud I am, every day, even after I'm gone." Carmen nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. "I'll make sure of it, Mr. Gerald. Now get some rest. Those boys will be up at dawn wanting pancakes." As she left, Gerald rolled his wheelchair one more time to the window. The house stood quiet now, but it was a different kind of silence than before. This silence was filled with presence, with life, with the promise of tomorrow's chaos. 6 months, the doctors had said, maybe less. Gerald thought he could accept that. What he couldn't accept was wasting whatever time remained. In the morning, he would teach Tyler that chess move he'd been asking about. He would listen to Marcus explain his latest invention. He would watch Eli struggle through geometry homework and offer the kind of patient encouragement that no one had offered him at 17. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that add up to a life worth living, even when that life was ending. The last thought Gerald had before sleep claimed him was simple and startling. He was happy. Genuinely, unexpectedly, impossibly happy. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the relentless progression of his disease, the boys' ongoing struggles with their past, the outside world that still viewed this arrangement with skepticism and mockery. But tonight, his house was full of laughter and dreams, and the quiet breathing of children who finally felt safe. For a dying man, that was more than enough. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late April. Gerald woke to the sound of his bedside phone, a piercing ring he hadn't heard in months. "G?" It was Eli's voice, tight with panic. It's Marcus. Something's wrong." By the time Gerald rolled his wheelchair into the kitchen, he found Marcus on the floor, writhing and gasping. Tyler crouched beside him, tears streaming down his face. Carmen was already there, having beaten Gerald by precious seconds. "Seizure," she said grimly, checking Marcus's pulse. "Probably withdrawal. How long has he been into your pills?" Gerald's heart sank. The painkillers. He should have noticed, should have paid attention. But Marcus had been so good lately, so focused on his projects, so present. "Since when?" Eli demanded, kneeling beside his brother. "Few weeks," Carmen admitted. "I caught him once, warned him, thought he'd stopped." She called 911, giving crisp, professional instructions to the dispatcher. As paramedics loaded Marcus onto a stretcher, the boy's eyes found Gerald. They were unfocused, rolling with pain and confusion. But he tried to speak. "Sorry. Sorry." Gerald's voice failed him. He could only nod, his own eyes stinging. At the hospital, they huddled in the waiting room. Tyler had fallen asleep against Eli's shoulder. Carmen kept checking her phone. Gerald stared at his hands, useless in his lap. "This is my fault," he finally managed through his synthesizer. Eli looked up sharply. "What?" "No, Marcus has been dealing with stuff since before you, since before we even met you. I should have seen." "Gee." Eli's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't fix everything. Some things we gotta figure out ourselves." When Marcus finally emerged from treatment, pale, shaky, but stable, he couldn't meet Gerald's eyes. The doctor spoke of rehab programs, counseling, ongoing support, words that should have frightened Gerald, but somehow gave him hope. "We'll do whatever it takes," he told the doctor. At home, as they helped Marcus to his room, Gerald called for a family meeting. They gathered in the living room, Marcus on the couch, looking small and broken, Tyler and Eli flanking him like bodyguards, Carmen hovering nearby. "I need to tell you something," Gerald began. His breathing was labored, each word an effort. "About me? About after?" 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him. The doctors say, "Weeks now, not months." Silence stretched between them. Then Tyler's lower lip began to tremble. "I know this isn't easy," Gerald continued, "but I need you to know what I've planned. For you. For all of you." He explained about the will, the trusts, the house that would become theirs. But then he told them about Embrace, the initiative that had consumed his thoughts for months. Youth centers, across the country, in your names, starting here in San Francisco. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Eli asked quietly. "Because I wanted you to choose your own futures, not feel obligated." "Obligated to what?" Marcus spoke for the first time since returning from the hospital. His voice was rough, tired. "To helping kids like us." "Exactly like you." Gerald met each of their gazes. Who understand what it means to need someone, to find family in unexpected places? That night, for the first time in months, none of them went to their separate rooms. They dragged blankets and pillows into the living room, camping out like they used to under the bridge. Gerald's wheelchair became part of their makeshift fort. In the darkness, stories emerged. Marcus talked about the first time he'd stolen pills. Not Gerald's, but his mother's years ago. Trying to dull the pain of watching her slowly destroy herself with addiction. Tyler whispered about dreams he'd never shared, of becoming an artist, maybe helping other kids draw their feelings instead of hiding them. Eli spoke last, about responsibility, about raising his brothers when he was barely more than a child himself, about the fear that still gripped him sometimes, that he wasn't enough, would never be enough. "You saved us, G," he said softly. "We got to figure out how to save ourselves now." Gerald listened, his medical equipment beeping softly in the background. Through the window, dawn was breaking. Another day bought, another small victory. "James is coming tomorrow," he told them. "We need to talk about practical things, what you'll need, who you can trust." "Can we trust you?" Tyler asked simply. "To come back somehow?" The question hung in the air. Gerald activated his synthesizer. "I'll always be here, in every kid who finds help, in every family that gets a second chance, in you three, most of all." Carmen found them at 6 a.m., a tangle of arms and blankets and people who had chosen each other. Rex had somehow joined the pile, his tail thumping against someone's leg. "Breakfast?" she asked softly. "In a minute," Eli murmured. "Just a few more minutes." Gerald understood. He'd spent decades chasing the next deal, the next meeting, the next marker of success. Now all he wanted was a few more minutes in this moment, with these boys who had become his purpose. The next few weeks blurred together. James visited daily, helping Gerald record video messages for each boy. They were practical at first: financial advice, college recommendations, guidance for navigating the systems that would surround them as his beneficiaries. But Gerald found himself recording other messages too. For birthdays they hadn't yet reached, for graduations he wouldn't attend, for moments when they might need to hear his voice again. "You don't have to watch these right away," he told them one afternoon as they filmed. "Save them for when you need them." Tyler, ever the artist, started documenting everything, his sketchbook filled with images. Gerald in his wheelchair, framed by morning light. Marcus's hands covered in grease from another invention. Eli bent over his books, preparing for exams that suddenly seemed impossibly important. The breakthrough came on a Sunday. They were having brunch, a new tradition started by Carmen, when Gerald's phone rang. The display showed a name he hadn't seen in years. Richard. The room fell silent. "Answer it," Eli said quietly. "We can handle whatever comes." Gerald did. "Hello, Richard." "Dad?" His son's voice was strained. "I heard about the severity of your condition and about the boys you've been caring for." A pause. "I'd like to come see you, if that's all right." Gerald looked at the three faces watching him. Eli nodded slightly. Marcus shrugged, his way of saying, "Your call." Tyler just waited, pencil hovering over his sketchpad. "Come Tuesday, 2 o'clock. After hanging up, the questions started immediately. "Who's Richard?" Tyler asked. "What's he want?" Marcus added. Only Eli was quiet, but his expression suggested he'd figured it out. "Richard is my son," Gerald explained. "We haven't spoken in 5 years. He might be coming to contest the will, to fight for his inheritance." "You mean fight against us?" Eli translated. "Possibly." "So what do we do?" Marcus's voice had an edge to it. Gerald recognized the defensive stance, the preparation for battle. "We tell the truth," Gerald said simply, "about who we are, what we mean to each other. The rest is up to him." Tuesday arrived with unseasonable warmth. Richard stood in the doorway exactly as Gerald remembered him, tall, well-dressed, carrying the rigid posture of someone permanently prepared for disappointment. The boys had arranged themselves strategically. Eli stood near Gerald's wheelchair. Marcus pretended to read on the couch, though Gerald noticed his knuckles were white around the book. Tyler sat on the floor with his sketchpad, openly studying this stranger who shared Gerald's features. "Dad?" Richard said, the word careful and formal. "Richard, thank you for coming." Gerald gestured to a chair. "These are the boys you've probably heard about. Eli, Marcus, and Tyler." "The criminals?" Richard's voice was cool. 3 sets of eyes flashed with anger, but Gerald raised his hand slightly. "They were surviving. There's a difference." What followed was one of the most difficult hours of Gerald's life. Richard alternately attacked and pleaded. He spoke of wasted opportunities, of the family Gerald had destroyed with his obsession for work. He accused the boys of manipulation, of taking advantage of a sick old man's loneliness. Through it all, the boys remained remarkably calm. When Richard demanded they tell the truth about what they really wanted, It was Tyler who answered. "We want G to be happy," he said simply. "We want him to not hurt, and we want to stay together even after." "After he dies?" Richard's voice cracked slightly. "You've thought about that?" "Every day," Eli admitted. "We know what we're losing." Something shifted in Richard's expression. For the first time, he really looked at Gerald, not at the wheelchair, the disease, the wealth he thought he was being cheated of, but at his father. "Why them?" Richard asked, quieter now. "Why not? Why didn't you ever—" "Because I failed you," Gerald interrupted. "I know that now. I was so busy building an empire that I forgot to build a family. But I can't change the past. I can only try to do better in the time I have left." The silence that followed was heavy with years of unspoken hurt. Then Marcus did something surprising. He closed his book and spoke directly to Richard. "Your dad's dying. That sucks. But he's still here. You want to waste time being mad, or you want to get to know him?" The question hung in the air. Richard stood, and for a moment, Gerald thought he would leave. Instead, he moved to the window, staring out at the courtyard where the boys had built their makeshift basketball court. "I used to play basketball here," he said softly, "when I was their age. Dad would come home from work, still in his suit, and we'd shoot hoops until dark." "The hoop's still there," Tyler offered. "We just moved it around." Richard turned back to them. His corporate mask had cracked, revealing something raw and lost. "I don't even know how to talk to him anymore." "Start small," Eli suggested. "He likes chess and jazz music and really bad jokes about diseases." Despite everything, Richard almost smiled. "Still telling those awful puns?" "Worse now," Gerald confirmed. "Much worse." What happened next defied all of Gerald's expectations. Richard didn't storm out. He didn't demand lawyers or accountant meetings. Instead, he sat down. They talked about old memories, current grudges, and the strange situation they all found themselves in. Richard admitted his alcoholism, his divorce, his years of therapy trying to understand their broken relationship. The boys gradually relaxed, even joining the conversation. Marcus showed Richard his workshop. Tyler offered to draw his portrait. Eli, ever practical, asked about Richard's job and whether he'd like to help with Embrace someday. By the time Richard left, something fundamental had shifted. At the door, he paused. "Dad, I'm still angry. About a lot of things, but..." He glanced at the boys. "I think I understand now. What you're trying to do." "Will you help them?" Gerald asked. "After I'm gone? Not with money. Just be family." Richard looked at his father, really looked, and nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I can do that." After he left, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight none of them had acknowledged was finally lifting. "That was weird," Tyler announced, sprawling on the couch. "Good weird," Marcus corrected. Eli came to stand beside Gerald's wheelchair. "You okay, G?" Gerald took a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the afternoon's revelations. "Better than I've been in a long time." That night, unable to sleep, Gerald made his way to his study. The house was quiet, but not empty. Through thin walls, he could hear the boys moving about their nighttime routines. Rex's collar jingling as he followed Tyler to bed. Marcus's soft music. Eli studying for tomorrow's test. He opened his laptop and began to type. Not another video message this time, but a letter. To them, to Richard, to everyone who had become part of this unexpected family. It started simply, "By the time you read this." But Gerald found himself pouring out thoughts he'd never voiced. About second chances and the courage required to love completely. About the strange arithmetic of death. How losing everything had somehow led to finding it all again. About three brothers who had saved him as much as he'd saved them. Outside, San Francisco Bay glimmered under moonlight. In a few weeks, maybe days, Gerald would be gone. but sitting in his study, surrounded by Tyler's drawings and Marcus's partially dismantled gadgets and Eli's carefully highlighted textbooks, he felt a deep satisfaction. He'd found his family, built his legacy, made peace with his son. Most remarkably, he'd discovered that in trying to give these boys a future, they'd given him a present worth living for. Gerald saved the letter and closed his laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. His breathing was getting worse, his medication regimen more complex. Dr. Chen had mentioned hospice care. Decisions needed to be made. But tonight, he was simply a father in a house full of children. A man who had learned, almost too late, what really mattered. As he rolled his wheelchair toward bed, Gerald paused outside Tyler's room. The door was cracked open and he could see the boy asleep, clutching a drawing. It showed all of them, Gerald, Eli, Marcus, Carmen, even Rex and Richard, standing together under a sunny sky. At the bottom, in Tyler's careful printing, "My family forever." Gerald smiled, or tried to, his facial muscles protesting. He continued down the hall, past Marcus's room, where soft snoring competed with the hum of some unfinished project. Past Eli's door, where a crack of light suggested late-night studying. In his own room, as Carmen helped him with the evening routine that had become second nature, Gerald spoke his thoughts aloud. "I'm ready." Carmen paused, understanding immediately. "Ready for what, Mr. Gerald?" "For whatever comes next. I've done what I needed to do." She nodded, adjusting his pillows. "Yes, you have. And those boys, they'll be ready too, when it's time." As Gerald drifted towards sleep, he thought about legacy. Not the corporate empire he'd built, or the foundation bearing his name, but something simpler and infinitely more complex. 3 boys who had learned to trust again. A son who might finally understand what it meant to forgive. A house that had remembered how to be a home. Sometimes the most important gifts were the ones you received while giving everything away. With that thought, Gerald Whitmore closed his eyes and let peace settle over him like a warm blanket. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, its losses, its small victories. But tonight was perfect exactly as it was. Gerald Whitmore died on a Thursday morning in May, just as the first roses bloomed in the garden Tyler had convinced him to plant. It was quiet. Carmen was with him, along with all 3 boys. They had slept in shifts for days, taking turns holding his hand, talking to him about everything and nothing. Eli read aloud from Gerald's favorite books. Marcus demonstrated his latest invention, a small robot that brought him ice chips when he pressed a button. Tyler drew pictures, taping them to the walls where Gerald could see them. At 6:23 a.m., his breathing grew shallow. By 6:30, it stopped altogether. Tyler was the first to speak. "He's not hurting anymore." Eli wrapped his arms around both brothers. They sat there for a long time, in the quiet that felt both empty and full. The funeral, arranged according to Gerald's detailed instructions, was small. Just the boys, Carmen, James the lawyer, and Richard. A few neighbors who had heard about the unconventional family and been quietly cheering them on. No press, no cameras. Gerald had been adamant about that, but news, as it tends to do, found its way out. The following Monday, James called them into his office for the reading of the will. Richard joined them, sitting stiffly in his expensive suit. He'd spent the weekend at the house, not talking much, but fixing the garbage disposal and helping Marcus organize his workshop. "Before we begin," James said, placing a sealed envelope on the table, "Gerald left specific instructions. This is to be read first." He opened it and began to read aloud. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. Don't mourn too long. I had more joy in my last months than in most of my years combined." To Richard, "I'm sorry for the father I wasn't. Thank you for the son you've become. The boys need an adult in their lives who understands what it means to struggle with forgiveness. Be their big brother." To my boys, "Everything I promised I've kept. The house is yours. The money will be there when you need it. But more than that, you have each other. That's the real inheritance. Now for something I haven't told anyone." James paused, looking at their expectant faces, then continued. "In the last 6 months, working with James, I've been building something. It's called the Embrace Initiative. Eli, Marcus, and Tyler, your names. But it's for all the children who, like you, need a chance. I've sold most of my assets, used the money to establish youth centers in 20 cities, starting with San Francisco. Each center will provide housing, education, therapy, job training, everything you needed when you lived under that bridge. The first center opens on what would have been my 69th birthday. Tyler, your drawings will be displayed in every lobby. Marcus, your inventions will be part of the hands-on learning programs. Eli, we've set up full college scholarships in your name. I know you didn't ask for this, but the world needs people who understand what it means to survive, to protect each other, to hope when hope seems impossible. Live your lives, be happy, but know that in helping others, you'll be helping yourselves too." The room was silent when James finished reading. Then Tyler started crying. Not sad tears, but something deeper, more complex. "He never said anything," Marcus whispered. "All those meetings with James, those late-night phone calls, he was planning this the whole time." The next morning, the story broke. Not because James had leaked it. Gerald had sent detailed information to select media outlets, timed for release exactly 1 week after his death. Dying Millionaire's Secret Legacy. Nationwide youth centers in homeless boys' names. The headline ran in newspapers across the country. Within hours, it was trending on social media. Embrace Initiative started spreading. Photos of the boys, carefully chosen by Gerald to show them at their best, appeared alongside the announcement. Tyler's artwork, Marcus's engineering projects, Eli at his GED graduation the month before Gerald died. The phone calls started immediately. James fielded requests from CNN, 60 Minutes, NPR. Youth advocacy groups wanted to partner with Embrace. Potential donors were offering additional funding. Politicians were calling for similar programs nationwide. "We don't have to do any interviews," Eli told his brothers as they watched the news unfold from their living room. "G said we could decide." "Actually," Richard said, entering the room with a cup of coffee, "he hoped you would. He recorded something else." They followed him to Gerald's study, where James had set up a projector. On screen appeared Gerald in his wheelchair, recorded just 2 weeks before his death. His voice was computerized now, but unmistakably him. "If you're watching this, the story is out. The world knows about Embrace and about you three. You have a choice. You can disappear, live quietly on the money I've left you. No one would blame you. Or you can speak. Tell people what it's really like. What you needed. What worked. What didn't. Remember, you're not alone anymore. You have each other. You have Richard and Carmen. You have every child who might find hope because you are willing to share your story. Whatever you choose, know that I'm proud of you. Not for what you might do, but for who you already are." The video ended with Gerald's trademark almost smile, the one that never quite worked because of the muscle weakness. They voted unanimously. Yes. The first interview was with a local news station. They sat together on the familiar couch, the one where they'd played Monopoly and had family meetings and watched Rex struggle to catch his tail. Eli spoke first, about living on the streets, about taking care of his brothers. His voice was steady, matter of fact. You do what you have to do, but having someone believe in you, that changes everything. Marcus talked about his addiction, his struggle with anger. G didn't try to fix me. He just made sure I knew I was worth fixing. Tyler, nervous but determined, held up his sketchbook. These drawings, G said they tell stories that words can't. He wanted other kids to know their stories matter too. The interview aired on a Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, it had been shared 50,000 times. More requests poured in, but along with them came criticism. Blog posts questioning whether the boys were coached. Op-eds wondering if Gerald had exploited them for PR. Anonymous comments suggesting they were professional victims now. It was Tyler who found the worst ones. Late at night, unable to sleep, scrolling through social media on the tablet Carmen had said he wasn't supposed to have in bed. "They hate us," he announced at breakfast, showing his brothers a particularly vicious thread. "They say we're fake. That G was just some rich guy feeling guilty." "People are stupid," Marcus said bluntly, but his fist was clenched around his fork. Eli took the tablet, reading quietly. Then he set it aside. "You know what? They don't matter. The kids who will get help because of Embrace, they matter. The rest is noise." But the noise grew louder. A former teacher came forward claiming Marcus had threatened her years ago. Grainy photos surfaced of Eli at a party, clearly drunk. Someone dug up police reports. It all culminated in a particularly nasty morning show segment. Were these boys really worth $1 billion gamble? The host wondered aloud. What does it say about our society when criminals become heroes? Carmen turned off the television in disgust. "Don't watch that garbage." "We have to," Eli said firmly. "If we're going to do this for real, speak for all the kids who don't have voices. We have to handle the ugly parts too." That's when James walked in with news that changed everything. Gerald left one more video. He wrote in his instructions that it should only be released if you were facing significant public backlash. They gathered in the study again. This time, even Carmen and Richard joined them. Gerald appeared on screen, looking directly into the camera. His voice was clearer in this recording, as if he'd saved his strength for this moment. "If you're watching this, people are attacking my boys. They're questioning their worthiness, their past, their right to receive help. Let me be clear, that's exactly why Embrace exists. Yes, Eli has a record. Yes, Marcus struggled with addiction. Yes, Tyler was so traumatized he couldn't speak for months. And yes, they lived under a bridge, stealing food to survive. But here's what those critics don't understand. These boys taught me something I'd forgotten in 40 years of business. That everyone deserves a second chance. That love isn't earned. It's given. That broken doesn't mean worthless." Gerald paused, his eyes glistening. If society had written them off completely, Eli would never have learned to calculate derivatives. Marcus would never have built robots that make people smile. Tyler would never have dared to dream in color. So to everyone watching, judge them if you want. Judge me if you want. But if you're judging children for surviving trauma instead of fixing the systems that created it, you're missing the point entirely. These boys are my legacy, not because they're perfect, but because they prove that broken things can be made whole. That forgiveness is more powerful than judgment. That if a dying man in a wheelchair could help change 3 lives, imagine what a healthy nation could accomplish. Don't let them do this work alone. Don't let the cynics win. Help us prove that America is still a place where second chances matter. Embrace starts with them, but it doesn't end there. It ends with every child we reach, every family we rebuild, every life we refuse to give up on. Because that's what fathers do, and that's what we all need to be for each other. The video ended, but its impact was immediate and profound. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 2 million times. The tone of coverage shifted dramatically. Critics found themselves outnumbered by supporters. Senator Elizabeth Warren mentioned Gerald's video in a speech about reforming youth services. Trevor Noah did a segment not mocking the situation, but praising it. Most unexpectedly, other wealthy individuals started coming forward. A tech billionaire in Seattle pledged to open 3 more Embrace centers. A former NFL player who'd been homeless as a child offered to fund athletics programs. "This is getting bigger than us," Marcus observed, watching the news coverage pile up. "Maybe that's the point," Richard suggested quietly. Dad always thought big, but this time he was thinking about the right things. The opening of the first Embrace Center happened on a sunny June morning. They'd decided to do it despite Gerald's absence, because his presence was everywhere. Tyler's artwork covered the walls. Marcus had designed interactive exhibits. Eli had worked with James to create a scholarship program that prioritized kids from similar backgrounds. Richard had taken a leave of absence from his job to help coordinate the program. "Dad would want this run right," he'd said simply. But the most touching moment came when the first residents arrived, 5 teenagers from the local shelter system. They walked in hesitant, guarded, carrying the same wariness the boys remembered from their first day at Gerald's mansion. "It gets easier," Eli told them. "Learning to trust again. It's scary, but it's worth it." The press conference afterward was broadcast nationally. The boys stood together, older now, more confident. Not just survivors anymore, but advocates. "Gerald Whitmore took a chance on us," Eli read from prepared remarks. "Now we're asking America to take a chance on every kid who needs help. Not because they deserve it, but because we all do. Because that's what families do for each other. And anyone without a family," Tyler added spontaneously, "can find one here, just like we did." The cameras clicked, the reporters took notes, but none of it mattered as much as the small interactions happening behind them. Marcus was already showing the new arrivals his workshop. Carmen was making grilled cheese sandwiches. Rex, now 11 and grayer but still energetic, was making friends with a small girl who hadn't smiled in weeks. Richard watched it all, finally understanding what his father had built. Not just a program or a foundation, but a model for how people could choose to care for each other. That evening, they returned to the mansion that still felt like Gerald's house, but was slowly becoming theirs. Tyler had painted a mural in the foyer. Gerald in his wheelchair, but surrounded by dozens of other figures in bright colors. Children who hadn't yet found their families. Adults who hadn't yet remembered how to help. At the bottom, in bold letters, "Embrace, it's never too late to start again." They ordered pizza and sat in Gerald's study, looking through photo albums Carmen had assembled. Gerald through the years, the boys when they first arrived, family dinners, chess games, Tyler's earliest drawings. "You think he'd be proud?" Tyler asked, his voice smaller than usual. "Yes," Richard said without hesitation. "Not just of what you're doing, but of who you are." Later, as the house settled into its evening rhythms, Marcus building something in his workshop, Eli video calling with a Embrace coordinator in Chicago, Tyler drawing plans for his college applications. Carmen found Richard standing in Gerald's study. "He spent months planning this," Richard said quietly. "Not just the money, every detail, the timing of announcements, which stories to share, how to protect you boys from the worst of it. He was always good at planning ahead. But this was different." Richard touched the keyboard of Gerald's computer, still sitting exactly where he'd left it. He wasn't planning for profit margins or stock performance. He was planning for love to continue after he was gone. "And has it?" Richard looked around the room. Gerald's medical equipment was gone now, but his chess set remained on the table. Tyler's latest drawing was taped to the wall. Marcus's voice drifted down the hall, explaining something technical to Eli. "Look around," he said simply. "The love is everywhere." 3 months later, Embrace opened its 5th center. The boys traveled to each opening, sharing their story, learning from new kids, expanding their understanding of what family could mean. They never forgot Gerald's final lesson, that helping others heal your own wounds. That second chances work both ways. That sometimes the best thing a parent can do is show their children how to become parents themselves. And in quiet moments, when the work was exhausting and the criticism still stung, they remembered his voice, computerized and weak, but absolutely certain. "You are my legacy. Not what you achieve, but who you already are." The last scene. A cold November night in San Francisco, exactly 2 years after Gerald first saw them on the news. The boys stand on an overpass above the freeway, not far from where they once built cardboard shelters. Below them, the Embrace mobile outreach team moved among the homeless camps, offering sandwiches, warm socks, information about services. Tyler points out a family with children huddled around a camp stove. "Should we go down there?" Marcus asks. "Already done," Eli says, holding up his phone. "I called the team. They'll be there in 20 minutes. They watch in comfortable silence as their father's vision plays out beneath them. Not perfect. Embrace couldn't save everyone immediately, but real, persistent, growing. "You think he can see this?" Tyler wonders aloud. "Doesn't matter," Richard says, joining them. "He's here anyway. In every kid who gets a chance, every family that finds each other, every person who chooses to help instead of judge." They turn to head back to the car, to home, to whatever comes next. But Tyler pauses, looking back at the sprawling city lights. In his pocket, he carries his latest drawing. It shows all of them still, but now they're not alone on the page. Hundreds of other figures stretch across the paper, all connected by invisible threads of care and possibility. At the top, in his most careful lettering, "Embrace, a legacy of love." He smiles and follows his brothers into the night. Behind them, the city continues its endless dance of lights and shadows, problems and solutions, broken people becoming whole. Gerald would have loved the view,